Today we're going to be talking about youth in the criminal justice system and how those interact and the issues that lie therein. The first place we could go is youth risk factors, such as children that are left behind, runaways, live on the streets, or live in abject poverty, and they really don't have a lot of choices in order to survive and get food each day. Another category would be children who are abused or have parental attitudes that don't really care about committing crime, and familial disintegration, and other children that lack parental supervision, or one of their parents is incarcerated, or they're not doing very well in school, or they have weak community ties. All of these issues have been seen to lead to an increased risk that youths will commit crime. Some studies show that parental incarceration before the age of 10 leads to a strong predictor that boys will have antisocial behavior and mental health problems. One study indicated that 48% of boys separated from their parents due to parental incarceration were convicted as adults. One other giant risk factor, unfortunately, is race. Being African American or Hispanic makes a person more likely to come into contact with the criminal justice system. So let's get into some biases that the criminal justice system has against youths. So African Americans make up 15% of all youths between the age of 10 and 17, but they comprise of 30% arrested and 50% of the juvenile cases that are transferred to criminal court. A lot of studies indicate that courts appear to give minority groups more severe sentences than their white counterparts of similar crimes. And sadly, nearly 2/3 of all child offenders on death row are ethnic or racial minorities. And between 1990 and 2000, the U.S. executed more juvenile offenders than the rest of the world's nations combined. Sadly, being both Hispanic or African American is left them to be more likely to be incarcerated before their court appearance, which also correlates to more severe punishments compared to their non-incarcerated counterparts. Some statistics on that is that African Americans were twice as likely to be arrested compared to their white counterparts. They were also 3 times more likely than whites to be put in a residential placement after being convicted of a crime. The large problem with this is the lack of money and resources that minority groups have. In general, most white people are more likely to have money to pay for treatment or afford a private attorney, which leads, in a lot of cases, to less severe punishments, as well as diversion, which can get them into a program that lets them take this transgression off of their record. The courts sometimes view that African American family structures are weak, and despite living in a 2-parent home, they are less likely to receive a diversion program than their white counterparts in similar family situations. So due to the lack of very strict guidelines on how juvenile justice can turn out, juvenile court justices can attribute positive or negative characteristics based on a person's ethnicity. While it may not be overly transparent why, a lot of things do happen that create this bias. The United States had an increase in youth crime in the 1990s and enacted laws that created a system with a super predator system, making many juvenile offenders automatically transferred to adult court systems. And due to mandatory sentencing, judges had little discretion, which left rehabilitation sentences out of the equation. Over 2,000 individuals in prison today are still serving life sentences in prison for crimes they committed as youths. In Philadelphia alone, accounts for almost 10% of these sentences nationally, and within that number, 80% of those youths were African American and sentenced to life without parole. So getting into some programs that try and combat this issue, we have the Coalition for Juvenile Justice, which is dedicated to preventing children and youth from becoming involved with the courts and upholding the highest standards of care when youths enter the justice system. They try to promote evidence-informed policies and practices in delinquency reduction. They are trying to educate the public and advising federal policymakers on state and local juvenile justice issues, trying to improve racial and ethnic fairness and court-based policies and practices, and they work with law enforcement and the community to help reform youth that are involved or are at risk for committing crime. So what exactly is the Coalition for Juvenile Justice? It is the national nonprofit organization that consists of many state advisory groups that are dedicated to preventing youth and coming into contact with the courts. They are funded by the government grants as well as donations from different foundations such as the MacArthur Foundation, which they spread throughout the states and state-level programs that they believe are making a difference in the youth criminal justice system. And to date, they have helped many falsely accused persons gain freedom utilizing DNA evidence, as well as making sure that they are not discriminated against in their court case. And if they find that there is compelling evidence that discrimination was happening, they petition for a correction in sentencing. Thanks for listening today, guys. Have a nice night. Bye-bye.